Hello. If you were looking for a scare tonight, you've come to the right place. I'll be narrating an hour's worth of creepy horror stories that I found off of Reddit. So without further ado,
These are their stories.
I haven't seen my grandma in 3 years. My mom and I moved across the country after the divorce, and we didn't have the money for a plane ticket. At least that's what my mom claims. I think it's just because she hates my grandma. Well, funny how her attitude magically changed when her boyfriend presented her with plane tickets to Costa Rica. Ava, your grandma's so much fun. She'll teach you how to knit. She'll teach you how to bake butterscotch cookies. She's the best. She did warn me about something though. Her mind has gotten bad, my mom told me. She has trouble remembering things, recognizing people. Is she gonna be okay? Yeah, but just be patient with her, okay? And if she seems really out of it, call Mrs. Dempsey down the street. I put her number in your phone. Okay. But you're going to have a great time, my mom said, plastering on a smile. It's going to be wonderful. 2 days later, I was getting off at Pittsburgh Airport. Funny how my mom said I was too young to go to the diner alone with Shireen. The world is dangerous for a 13-year-old girl, her words. But she had no problem sending me off on a plane alone. My grandma wasn't great with cell phones. She didn't pick up when I called, but as soon as I got to the pickup line, I saw her silver Subaru out back at the curb. Grandma stood beside it, smiling widely. Grandma, I said, running up to her. She didn't open her arms to hug me. She just stood there looking down at me. Grandma. Hello, dear, she said after a pause, as if just noticing me for the first time now. How have you been? I'm so happy to see you. Then she opened the car door and gestured me inside. The car smelled like old person smell. I'm sorry that's mean, but it's true. I crinkled my nose as I pulled on my seatbelt, and she drove us back through the city, out into the Pennsylvania countryside. Get comfortable, dear, Grandma said as she led me inside. The house looked the same as it always did, a little stale, a little outdated, but also oddly comforting compared to the minimalistic style of my mom's house. I glanced at the needlepoint hanging in the foyer of a large pitcher of lemonade. Make yourself at home. You can eat anything you find in the fridge or the pantry, she told me. Oh, except I almost forgot. I do have one rule. The basement is off limits. Why? It's a little dangerous down there, dear. Wouldn't want you getting hurt. I frowned. The basement had never been off limits before. It was finished on one side, and she had a bunch of board games and a sofa down there. I liked hanging out down there. It was the only place that didn't smell like old people. It wasn't dangerous before, I protested. Well, it is now, she said in a significantly firmer tone. Then her smile went right back on, and she asked me, would you like some butterscotch cookies? Yes, please. My mom was right. Grandma was kind of fun. I helped her with the cookies and she told me she'd send me home with the recipe. I did some reading and talked to my friend Shireen on the phone. Then it was bedtime. Tall and thin, Grandma looked like a ghost as she paced down the dark hallway to her bedroom. Night night, she said, poking her head out and giving me a wave. Good night, Grandma. Her blue eyes glinted in the darkness. Then the door snicked shut. I fell asleep quickly, despite the bed that was a little too soft and the loud cricket outside my window. I woke up with a start, however, and looked at my phone to see it was almost 2 a.m. My throat was parched, so I headed out to the hall bathroom to get some water. As I walked across the hallway, I noticed Grandma's bedroom door was open. And as I looked harder, what the hell, Grandma was sitting on her bed in her nightgown, staring out into the hallway, head tilted slightly, blue eyes glinting in the darkness. I stopped in my tracks. Grandma, was she smiling? Grandma. Ava, is that you? She called out. No, she wasn't smiling. At least not anymore. Yeah, it's me, I replied, my voice wavering. Why are you up? I thought I heard something, she replied, so I was just sitting here to make sure it was nothing. I got my water, feeling unsettled. When I got out of the bathroom, Grandma was poking her head out of the doorway again, waving. Night night, and good night. The next day when I asked her about it, she didn't even seem to remember the interaction. I don't remember being up, she said, looking at me. In the sunny light filtering through the window, she looked much less scary. White hair tied back with a silver barrette, pale wrinkled skin, tired blue eyes. You saw me up. Yes, I said firmly. Huh. She rose from the seat, still in her nightgown, and shuffled towards the stove. Would you like pancakes this morning, Allison? My heart sank. Allison was my mom's name. Ava, I corrected, following her into the kitchen. Right, of course, Ava. She shook her head. You're just a spitting image of her when she was your age. The dark eyebrows and the curly hair. She shook her head again. It's like going back in time. She made the pancakes in silence, the tines of the fork hitting the bowl. Another egg egg glooping in, cracked eggshells set by the counter, a sharp sizzle as the viscous batter hit the cast iron pan. I have chocolate chips I can add, she said, riffling through the counter. Oh wait, these expired a year ago. It's fine, I told her. After breakfast, I thought maybe we'd play a game of Go Fish like old times, or take a walk, but Grandma had other plans. I'm afraid I'm feeling rather tired, she told me. Is it okay if I go rest and you just hang out here? That's fine. I brought my Switch, I told her. Video games. Oh, okay, that's nice. Well, get me if you need anything, okay? I nodded. I found myself surprised that I was disappointed. I thought I didn't miss all those things we used to do, boring things like playing cards or walking, but I did, whatever. I'm here for a whole week, I told myself, going up to my room. I booted up my Switch and started playing Pokemon. A few hours went by. When I got hungry, I went back down to the kitchen, but Grandma still wasn't around. I hope she's okay, I thought. I poked around the fridge and found some leftover chicken dated 2 days ago. I popped it in the microwave and sat down to eat. I'd only been eating a few minutes when I heard it, a scuffing sound coming from the basement. I got off the couch and walked towards the basement door. She told me not to go down there. What was down there then? Rats? An illegal, exotic pet? Yeah, right. The scuffing sounds continued. I pressed my ear to the door, and then I heard it. Help me. Spoken in my grandma's voice. Every muscle in my body froze. She must have gotten trapped down there. Maybe she fell down the stairs. That's why I haven't seen her for hours. I undid the deadbolt and swung the door open. Grandma, I called. The lights were off, but from what little I could see, it didn't look like she was lying at the bottom of the stairs. Thank God. Grandma, I called again, louder this time. Help me. Hands grabbed me from behind and yanked me forcefully back. The door slammed in my face. Then my grandma was in my face, her eyes wild. I told you not to go in the basement, she shrieked, so loudly my ears rang. I heard you down there, I said, my voice trembling. No, you didn't, she snapped back, her face twisted in this awful, vicious expression of anger I'd never seen before. I'm right here. I was upstairs lying down when I heard you calling for me. There is no one down there. But I heard you, I said, tears starting to prickle my eyes. She just shook her head and walked away. For the rest of the day, Grandma sat in the living room knitting. Every time I passed by the basement door, her eyes followed me. I started to feel incredibly uncomfortable. When I went up to my bedroom to talk to Shireen, I could hear her footsteps outside my door. She was trying to be as quiet as possible. Her footsteps were slow and light, but I still heard them. When I came down for dinner, Grandma was all smiles. She served me a dish of warm lasagna, cheese melty and gooey on top, smelling of garlic and onion. Thanks, I said. It felt like she was trying to make amends for yelling at me, but when I sat down to eat it, she just stared at me. Aren't you going to have some? I asked, hovering the first bite next to my mouth. No, it doesn't fit my diet. This is just for you, Allison, she replied. Ava, I snapped back. I set the fork down. This was feeling like all kinds of weird. I stared at my grandma's face, a chill going down my spine. Her blue eyes were so intense, so cold. She seemed so different from 3 years ago. What kind of cake did you make me for my 9th birthday? I asked, and she tilted her head, staring intently. I don't remember, dear. You spent all day on that cake. Of course you remember. Her mouth became a thin line. She paused. I don't remember. What's my birthday then? I pressed. She blinked. It's October, isn't it? September 14th. I'm sorry, dear, she finally said, breaking eye contact. I don't remember things as well as I used to, and I mix up names and words. It's not because I don't love you. I stared at her, and then I forced a fake smile. I know, Grandma, I love you. Then I got up from the table and started up the stairs. You haven't finished your lasagna, dear? Grandma's voice came from the bottom of the stairs. I'm not hungry, I called back. I hadn't taken a single bite. I think my grandma's a skinwalker, I whispered into the phone. Shireen gasped on the other end. What? She doesn't remember anything about me. I think she's keeping my real grandma locked away down in the basement. Oh, what? I heard her voice, calling for help. A heavy sigh. Shireen was not the superstitious type. Are you sure you heard her voice from the basement? Yes. What are you gonna do? I'm gonna go down there, I replied, tonight. Maybe you should just wait for your mom to get back. My grandma could be dead by then. Maybe you should call the police. What if my grandma tells them I'm a liar, that I made it all up? Are they going to believe her, or a 13-year-old girl? I still think you shouldn't go down there. Well, I'm gonna... Okay, well, give me your address or something. If you don't call me back, I'll call the police. Good idea. I gave her my address. She tried to talk me out of it for another 10 minutes, and then I hung up. Then I swung the door open and crept out into the hallway. Silence. Darkness under Grandma's or not Grandma's door. I was safe. I tiptoed down the stairs and walked over to the basement door. Then I waited for a few minutes to make sure not Grandma wasn't following me. Silence. I slowly, quietly slid the deadbolt. Then I swung the door open, creaking slightly on its hinges. I winced, hoping that didn't wake her up. No scuffing sounds, no voice calling for help. Maybe she's already... I swallowed the thought and started down the stairs. The light didn't seem to work, but I had my phone with me. The flashlight illuminated each step beneath me. I slowly made my way down. When my feet hit the cold concrete bottom, I swung the light around. All the blood drained out of my face. Sitting on the floor, chained to a support pole, was my grandma. Her head hung limply in front of her, white curls hanging over her face. Grandma, I called, my throat tightening. I hope she isn't already... Grandma lifted her head. The phone fell out of my hands. Her face. There was something horribly wrong with her face. Pure white eyes, a wide smile full of pointed teeth, skin that seemed to slough off her face in patches, revealing bone beneath. Number no. A horrible cracking sound filled the air. I watched in horror as the thing transformed. Bones twisted and contorted. The face opened its mouth in a silent scream. And then, I was staring at myself chained to the post, white eyes fading to match my brown ones. It cocked its head. Hello, it said in a voice that matched my own. I let out a scream. And then Grandma, real Grandma from upstairs, not this horrible thing, was grabbing me and shoving me up the stairs. The door slammed shut and I found myself on the floor, panting, looking up at her. What did I tell you? Don't go in the basement. What? Grandma? I choked out. She double-checked the door was locked, then led me to the kitchen. That thing showed up a year ago, she told me, as she pulled out my leftover, now congealed piece of lasagna from the fridge. She draped a thin blanket over my shoulders and sat down across from me. At first, it took the appearance of an old friend of mine. I let it in, I fed it. Not just food, she said, glancing down at the lasagna in front of me, still uneaten. It started eating my memories. How? I don't know how, but I found myself forgetting simple things, names, dates, birthdays, and then one day I woke up to the thing looking just like me. I don't think it was aware that I would not respond well to a person looking exactly like me. I tricked it into the basement by pretending to relive a memory of the basement being a very important place over and over again. It eventually ate that memory and went down there. I locked it in. With the help of someone I met online, someone who believed me, I was able to chain it to the post, and I'm keeping it there so it can't hurt anyone else. I stared at her. If you knew you had this dangerous thing in your basement, why did you let me stay here? I missed you and I foolishly thought you'd listen to me. Scuffling sounds came from beneath us, and then I heard my own voice reverberating through the floor. Help me, get back down here and help me. Will it eat my memories too? I whispered. A number, it needs physical contact for that. Our talk was interrupted by 3 short knocks on the door, and that's when I realized I never called Shireen back, and couldn't because my phone was at the bottom of the basement stairs, down there with it. I'll take care of this, I told her, getting up from the kitchen table. Thankfully, the police bought my tail, and because I didn't let them in, didn't hear the clone of me screaming the basement. Then I used Grandma's old computer to send Shireen an email. There's still the matter of the thing in the basement, of course, but that's another problem for another day. For now, I'm going to eat some lasagna and then go straight to bed. And Mom was right, my grandma is fun. My girlfriend and I are seasoned hikers. We've tackled everything from rugged mountain trails to swampy, mosquito-infested paths, and we've always made it out unscathed. But this time was different. This time, the trail almost didn't let us go. It started with a warning. I know, that sounds over the top, but it's true. The guy at the ranger station, a wiry, middle-aged man with a leathery face, looked up from his clipboard as we signed in. You two sticking to the main trail? He sounded like he must have smoked 4 packs a day for the last decade. Planning on taking the loop trail up to the summit, I replied, we've been looking into it for a while and we think the weather's right for it this weekend. We've never been through Barak Park before, but we've heard it's beautiful. My girlfriend curled her arm through mine and rested her cheek on my shoulder. It's going to be great. I think he might have something special planned for us. I didn't. My smile turned nervous. The ranger hesitated, his pen hovering over the paper. Could he tell I didn't have a ring? Was he about to out me? Number. He braced a hand on the counter and leaned forward. eyes serious beneath bushy eyebrows. Stick to the marked paths, and if you hear anything strange like a kid crying, you keep walking. Don't stop, don't look, just keep going. What? My girlfriend gave a nervous laugh. Don't want you to get lost. The ranger's eyes didn't waver. People go looking for what they shouldn't, and not all of them come back. We decided it was just some backwoods superstition to spook tourists. What else could it be? So after we brushed off the nerves, we shouldered our packs and started up the trail. The first few hours were uneventful, just the two of us surrounded by towering pines, the crunch of dirt and leaves underfoot, and the occasional bird call. If you've ever been on a hike before, well, there you go. Standard day. My girlfriend kept looking over at me, eyes gone to honey. I didn't know why she thought this was a special proposal trip. It wasn't until we parked I even realized that's where her expectations were set, and my attention, yeah, I was trying to figure out what I was going to do to cushion the blow when we hit summit. Then we heard it, a child's voice crying. We stopped dead in our tracks. Amber froze, her eyes wide. Do you hear that? I nodded, my stomach twisting into knots. It sounded like a little girl, maybe 6 or 7 years old. Help me, she was calling out, her voice breaking with sobs. Please help me, mommy, daddy. Her voice grew quiet with fear. Anyone? Hello, are you okay? I called, my voice bouncing off the trees. The crying stopped. For a moment the forest was silent, too silent, no wind, no birds, nothing. Then the crying started again, louder this time, closer. We need to check it out, Amber said, already stepping off the trail. She waved her arms to the side to keep her balance as she made her way down the incline. Every instinct I had screamed at me to stop her. The ranger said, "Screw what the ranger said," she snapped. If it was your kid out there, wouldn't you want someone to help? She had a point. Against my better judgment, I followed her down the incline and into the trees. The crying led us deeper into the woods. Help me, someone, please. She sounded frantic, but the further we went, the more I noticed something was off. The voice wasn't changing direction. Normally, if someone's lost, their voice shifts as they move or turn their head. But this sound, it was static, like it was coming from a fixed point. The ranger's warning came back to mind. My steps started to slow down. Amber, I think we should go back. Something's not right. I can't find you, please, I'm scared. The kid was sobbing now. Stop acting like a jerk, Amber snapped. She's gotta be right ahead of us. Amber was right. 20 more feet and we saw her. She was sitting on a fallen log, her back to us, wearing a dirty pink jacket and clutching her knees to her chest. Hey sweetie, Amber called gently, stepping closer. Are you lost? Where are your parents? The girl didn't answer. She just kept crying, her shoulders shaking with each sob. Please help me. Amber crouched down, reaching out to touch her shoulder. Wait, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. Something about this felt wrong. Why was she just sitting there? When Amber had called for her, why hadn't she tried to find us? Amber, we should just go get the ranger, come on. The girl's crying stopped. In one smooth, jerky motion, she turned to face us. Her eyes weren't right. They were too large, too dark, reflecting the light like an animal's. You found me. Her mouth stretched wide into a grin that split her face unnaturally, revealing rows of sharp, needle-like teeth. I knew you would. I knew if I called for you, you would find me. Then her skin, her entire skin, began to split down the middle like a zipper. I don't know what I was expecting to see underneath, but it wasn't this. It wasn't the sinewy, raw-looking creature that crawled out of its human shell like a spider shedding its exoskeleton. Amber screamed, stumbling backward. I grabbed her arm, yanking her to her feet, shouting, "Run," so loudly it made my throat sting. We bolted, crashing through the underbrush, branches whipping at our faces. Behind us, I heard the creature give a low, guttural growl, followed by the unmistakable sound of something running, fast. It was chasing us. We hit the incline, then the trail, and didn't stop running until we burst back into the ranger station, gasping for air. The ranger looked up from his desk, his face grim. You heard it, didn't you? We nodded, too shaken to speak. He sighed, getting up and locking the door. You're lucky you ran, most people don't. We didn't ask what he meant, we didn't want to know. We've hiked dozens of trails since that day, but we've never gone back to that forest. And if we ever hear crying in the woods again, we'll keep walking. So, I've lived in the same town all my life. I've never really been one of those people that wants to see the world. Not that there's anything wrong with that, it's just not my jam. I'm very content with my simple little life in a town of only about 6,000 people. The internet, more specifically Wi-Fi accessibility, hadn't quite reached us until a decade or so ago, and even then most were too poor to afford any kind of setup. Now, we're not backwards, incest-ridden savages or anything. I assume mostly everyone who's still here is pretty much like me, just happy with with their small life, like Mrs. Weller. She's a widow just down the road from where I live, and she's well known for taking in animals that need a second chance. She's got the acreage and know-how, as she's the only one around here that we could call a vet. Actually, she's the reason I'm writing this today. I've recently realized that some of the things that go on around here aren't exactly normal. You live somewhere long enough, and even if the status quo for us wasn't at all similar to how others live, we wouldn't really know. The closest town is separated from us by miles and miles of farmland, about a 45-minute drive, but we've got the dollar store, a small grocery place, gas station, and post office. So why would we ever have a reason to go poking around elsewhere, right? Despite having limited access to the internet at best, we all had a radio. We needed one, really. At least once a week we'd be informed about some kind of danger, I guess. To us it was the same kind of warning as the typical "there's been a crash on blah 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 highway, so plan your route accordingly." Anyway, sorry I got to rambling. I'll get on to the good part, I suppose. A couple nights ago I had the radio on, just like my mama had always told me to do, when the familiar sound of an incoming PSA roused me from sleep. See, we were taught to always keep some kind of radio going, whether it was in the truck, at the dinner table, or while we slept. The little box on the bedside table started to sing out the alarm we'd all come to be familiar with, not dissimilar to a tornado warning on TV. After about 10 seconds of this, the male announcer began to speak. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a PSA for county residents. Mrs. Weller has informed local police that a horse has chewed through the fence and escaped. Please, if you see this animal, stay far away and call 911 to report your sighting. If you begin to hear voices or have thoughts that are not your own, turn away and run. If you begin to feel faint or nauseous while looking at the animal, turn away and run. If the animal makes eye contact with you or begins to walk in your direction, turn away and run. If you cannot see any horse-like animal but begin to feel a heavy pressure on your chest, enter your vehicle or run home as quickly as possible. If you are inside your home at this moment, remain there until an update has been broadcasted notifying the capture of this animal. Lastly, remember that horses do not speak." Now, I hadn't been too worried about the announcement at the time since I was already in bed. Even though it's a small town, most of us usually lock our doors at night anyway. I regarded it the same way I do just about every time the PSA tones come across the radio. I made a mental note to keep an ear out for the all okay broadcast and drifted back to sleep, only a little bit concerned with the dull pain growing in my chest. I woke just fine in the morning. When I sat at the kitchen table, a thought started creeping up on me. I'd been so tired when the PSA called out last night, but as the grumble of the coffee maker softly filled the silence, I really took a moment to analyze the words. Well, of course horses don't speak. Everyone knows that, I thought. Even though our town, probably even our county, was indefinitely weird, I'd be confident in saying that all the residents are firmly rooted to reality. We know the announcements are strange, but after generations of tribal knowledge, they kinda just fell into the background. Come to think of it, I really couldn't remember hearing about anyone around here leaving for a different life. I filled my cup, deciding that I'd run by the gas and munch for an egg sandwich so I could sit and talk with the other farmers while I finished breakfast. I got into the truck. The door latch is a little sticky, so I had to slam it loudly a few times before it shut. The sky was still dark, and the air was chilly and humid in the morning hours. I kept my handheld radio on the center console, as the radio in this old truck had stopped chugging years ago when that family of three-headed squirrels made a nest in my wiring harness that I was never able to fully fix. Not the only time I had to deal with those crafty little things either. Last winter, they nested up in the attic with insulation and old crap, I said to the dark truck cab as I slammed on the brakes. The horse. God, I completely forgot. There had been no accompanying broadcast announcing the capture of the horse. A small pang of fear settled in my chest, not quite blooming into full-on panic yet as I started the 5-point turn it would take to turn around on the 2-lane I'd been on. This control was short-lived though, just as my truck became completely perpendicular with the road. My headlights illuminated the last thing I wanted to see, standing in the half-grown soybean field in front of me. It definitely did not look like a horse. The neck was about twice as long as it should have been. Shredded and necrotic flesh clung to its emaciated form. The mane was frizzy and rat-nested, but the worst part was the sheer size of the thing. My best guess for breed was thoroughbred, but the thing still stood around 21 hands tall just at the shoulders. For those who don't know, 21 hands is about 7 feet tall. I'd like to say I kept my cool. That years of living in what's most likely the weirdest place ever has hardened me into to a farm boy tough enough to scoff at unnatural horrors like this one, but I totally didn't. No, I slammed the gas and spun the tires fast enough to complete my U-turn and only skip into the ditch for about a foot or two. For only a moment I had hoped that the horse would just keep being creepy in its creepy little spot on the side of this creepy little road, but of course it didn't. As soon as the truck started moving again, the horse began to run towards me. I felt the truck shake as it leapt into the bed and started pounding its rotting hooves on the top of the cab. My frantic mind only had one idea as I backtracked down the road. After all, Mrs. Weller was only a few miles down from me. I turned on the unpaved road, wheels spinning and sliding on loose gravel as I continued pushing the pedal so hard I was worried it'd break through the rusty floor panels. I could hear crunching glass as the horse nipped on my back windows. Voices screamed in my head all the while. "You should drive into the ditch. Look, there's a telephone pole, take your chance." I did my best to tune it all out, but the exaggerated thudding in my chest was accentuated by an immense pressure. It felt like someone was stacking bricks on my chest. I turned down the next road, and now it was a straight shot to Mrs. Weller's farm. Suddenly, the ear-splitting sounds of tearing metal and shattering glass faded away. In the moment, fear blinded my senses. Muscle memory was the only thing guiding me towards my destination. The lights at the end of her driveway flickered and fought with my headlights. Still hauling ass, I slid the corner into Mrs. Weller's driveway and the truck lifted a couple inches with the release of weight off of the suspension. Just out of the corner of my eye, I saw the brown flash of an impossibly large, impossibly fast horse running towards the back pasture. I took a breath and steadied myself to back out onto the road when the radio crackled loudly to life. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is a PSA for county residents. Mrs. Weller's horse has been returned to her property and it is now safe to leave your homes. We hope you have a good day. God bless." I jumped at a sudden tap on the glass to my left. Sweet Mrs. Weller stood with a grateful smile and a steaming cup of coffee to replace what had spilled out of my travel mug, which was now rolling around on the passenger floorboards of the truck. I know this town is weird and maybe even horrifying, but at the end of the day, I knew my neighbors would be around to lend a helping hand when needed. I drove back down the road on my way to a warm egg sandwich with a travel mug full of steaming coffee, still feeling content with my simple little life. My son's furious screams echoed through the mall as I dragged him toward the clothing store, his feet kicking out in defiance with every step. People were staring as if I were the worst mother, but was too tired to care. His small fists pounded the air, his face flushed with frustration. "I don't want new clothes," he yelled. His shoes scuffed the polished floor as I dragged him forward. I muttered promises of ice cream, hoping to bribe him into submission. "Can we get mint chip ice cream?" he asked as he began to calm. As my son grudgingly stepped into the fitting room, I finally exhaled, hoping for a moment's peace. I glanced at my phone, scrolling through messages. As I waited, relieved at the short moment of peace while he tried on the clothes. Minutes passed and I barely noticed. When I finally looked up, the fitting room was eerily quiet. I called his name but got no answer. Panic set in as I hurried over to the door, knocking gently. I swung the door open and was stunned to find it empty. The pile of clothes lay untouched on the floor. Where could he have disappeared so quickly? I thought to myself. As I searched around the store, panic turned to absolute dread when I realized there was no sign of him anywhere. The worst thoughts were running through my mind as I screamed his name. People looked at me dumbfounded when I asked them if they had seen my son. When I begged the security guards to check the CCTV, they brought me to the mall's control room. I watched closely at the screens as they scanned through the camera's feeds. When I spotted my son walking out of the store, the security guards were as stunned as I was when the person walking off with my son looked exactly like me. They even drove off in the car I drove to the store in. The police wanted to confirm I wasn't crazy when they suggested they drive me to my address, but when I spotted my car back in the driveway, I felt like I was going completely insane. The two police officers looked at each other when my house key didn't fit in the door lock. "Are you sure this is your address, ma'am?" "My husband will clarify for you who I am," I shouted as I banged down the door. When my husband came to the door, he looked at me as if I were a complete stranger. "Someone kidnapped our..." Suddenly, my son ran out and jumped up into my husband's arms. I was relieved he was home safe, but when the woman I saw on security feed came to the door, I wasn't sure what to believe. "This woman is an imposter," I protested. "I am that boy's mother. Tell them, Sam." "I've never seen this woman in my life, officer. As you can see, my wife is here with me and my boy. The police said the handcuffs were for my own safety as they were putting me in the back of the police car. There was no evidence to suggest I wasn't who I was saying I was, so the police had no reason to keep me once we got back to the police station. Although I promised the police I wouldn't go back to the house, I had no choice. It was my house after all. It felt like I had my identity stolen. There was even a moment where I doubted who I was, but I wasn't crazy and I knew who I was. I sat outside the house, heart pounding, trying to make sense of the madness. I knew I had to confront them. I gathered my nerve and walked to the door, pounding on it until my husband opened the door. The frustrated and cold expression on my husband's face as my son clung to his leg shattered my soul. "Sam, please, you have to listen to me," I begged. "That woman is an imposter. She's pretending to be me. I don't know how, but you know me. You have to know me." The woman appeared behind him and stood calm and collected. She rested a hand on Sam's shoulder and looked at me with pity in her eyes. "I think you should leave before things get worse for you," she said softly, as if speaking to a lost child. My son stared up at me with a confused look on his face. "Mommy?" he asked, unsure, glancing between us. My heart broke as I crouched down to his level. "Sweetie, it's me," I whispered, tears welling up. "I'm your mom. Remember our favorite bedtime stories? We went to the mall today. You were upset about getting clothes and we were going to get mint chip ice cream afterward." His face scrunched up in confusion, but before he could say anything, the woman stepped forward. "Honey, we already had mint chip ice cream at home, remember?" she said, kneeling down next to my son. Sam pulled my son close, his eyes narrowing at me. "I don't know what you're trying to pull," he said coldly, "but this is my wife and our son. Please leave us alone." I waited down the street out of sight, keeping my eyes fixed on the house. My mind raced with everything that had happened, and I felt trapped in some twisted nightmare. Hours passed before I saw Sam leave with our son, heading off in his car. I got out of the car and cautiously approached the house as my heart pounded in my chest. As I neared the door, it suddenly opened, and there she was, stepping out onto the porch like she owned the place. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking with both rage and fear. "What do you want with my family?" She just smirked, tilting her head slightly. "You're not supposed to be here," she said calmly, as if I were the intruder in my own life. "That's my life inside. You can't just take it," I snapped, stepping closer. Her smile didn't falter. "I already have," she whispered. "You should leave. You don't belong here anymore." I stood frozen as the rage built inside me. As soon as her smug words hit me, something inside snapped. Without thinking, I lunged forward and shoved the imposter into the house. She stumbled back, eyes wide in surprise, before quickly regaining her balance. I rushed in after her, but before I could get another word out, she struck. Her fist slammed into my stomach, knocking the wind out of me. I gasped, doubling over in pain. "You're making a mistake," she hissed. I tried to fight back, but she was terrifyingly strong. She grabbed me by the collar and threw me against the wall, the impact sending shockwaves through my body. Dazed, I scrambled to my feet. My only thought now was survival. She lunged for me again, but I dodged her grasp and ran toward the stairs. I could hear her footsteps pounding behind me, getting closer. My heart raced as I sprinted up the stairs, desperate to get away. But just as I reached the top, she grabbed my ankle, pulling me backward. I kicked out wildly, and in one desperate move, I twisted and shoved her as hard as I could. She toppled backward, tumbling down the stairs. I heard the sickening crack as her neck snapped at the bottom and her body twisted unnaturally. For a moment there was silence, and I caught my breath, thinking it was over. But then, to my horror, her body twitched. Her head jerked to the side with a grinding noise, and sparks flickered from her neck. She began to rise slowly, her movements stiff and mechanical. Pieces of her skin peeled away, revealing metal and wires. She wasn't human, she was a robot. Her eyes flickered and a distorted voice emerged. "I just wanted to be perfect. Isn't that what you always wanted?" Suddenly, the light in her eyes flickered and slowly dimmed before she fell to the floor. The front door creaked open and I froze at the top of the stairs. My heart was pounding as Sam stepped into the house with our son. His smile faded instantly when he saw the mangled android at the bottom of the stairs, sparks flickering from its broken neck. His expression changed from shock to something dark. He slowly set our son down before telling him to wait in the car. As the boy ran outside, Sam's gaze focused back to me, his eyes narrowing in a a way I'd never seen before. "You weren't supposed to find out like this," he muttered, his voice eerily calm as he approached the stairs. I thought I had more time to perfect her. I backed away as dread crept up my spine as the weight of his words began sinking in. "Sam, what is this? What did you do?" He didn't answer immediately, his eyes drifting toward the broken android. "You always wondered what I did at work, didn't you? I've been working on this for years. Lifelike androids, advanced robotics. She was supposed to be perfect. The perfect wife, the perfect mother, no flaws, no doubts." His voice became bitter as his gaze locked onto mine. "Unlike you." I took a step back, my mind racing. I knew Sam worked for a robotics company, but I had no idea how close he was to creating something so real, something meant to replace me. "You were going to replace me," I whispered, my voice trembling. "Not replace," he said, a twisted smile creeping across his face as he took another step closer. "Improve. She was everything you're not. She didn't argue. She didn't fight me. She was obedient, loving, and everything you refused to be." Panic surged through me as he edged closer, his demeanor growing more threatening with every step. "Sam, you can't seriously believe this," I said as the words struggled to get out of my mouth. "You tried to build a family." He chuckled darkly, his eyes gleaming with something unhinged. "I did more than try. I succeeded." My heart pounded in my chest, but all I could think about now was getting out and getting my son and running as far away as possible. I bolted for the door, adrenaline kicking in. "You're not taking my son," he shouted. I slammed the door behind me, sprinting for the car, grabbing my boy before Sam could reach us. I booked me and Daniel into a hotel until I figured out what we were going to do next. My heart was still racing from the chaos we just escaped from. The room was quiet, a stark contrast to the horror that had unfolded at the house. For a moment I allowed myself to breathe, to feel some relief. We were safe, away from Sam and his twisted creation. "Let's get you cleaned up, buddy," I said softly, trying to keep things normal for Daniel. He smiled up at me, innocent and unaware of the nightmare we just fled. I filled the tub with warm water and helped him in, watching as he relaxed, splashing happily. For the first time all day, I felt a sense of calm wash over me. I sat on the edge of the tub, running my hand through his hair, grateful that we'd made it out together. But then something strange happened. Daniel's movements grew stiff and jerky. He stopped splashing and his head tilted to the side in an unnatural way. My heart dropped. "Mommy, I don't feel good," he said, his voice distorted. Water fizzled around him and I saw tiny, almost invisible sparks at first coming from his neck. "No," I whispered, backing away in horror. His skin began to peel, revealing metal and wires underneath. Sam hadn't just built the perfect wife, he was trying to build the perfect family. There was a story about it in the paper. People at church offered their condolences. Kids at school that I never talked to would give me sideways glances. When a 5-year-old gets washed into a cave and there is a 2-week search, it tends to get attention. I never wanted condolences, I wanted closure. Even if he was dead, I needed to see his body. The thought that he could have died down there, alone and in the dark, was unacceptable to me. When they stopped searching after 2 weeks, my only thought was that it would take someone longer than that to starve to death. There was plenty of water down there. If he had been washed into an inaccessible part of the cave, then he could still be alive. My dad had to physically keep me from trying to go back into the cave myself, to tell me that it was over, that he was gone. In my heart, I didn't believe he was dead. I was 16 at the time, a junior in high school. Kieran had been an oops baby. 11 years younger than me, he was the sweetest kid, even though he was insane. At age 4, he'd broken a leg and an arm falling about 30 feet out of a tree he had managed to climb. He was always running around climbing and jumping off of things, yelling and laughing. He probably had ADH in retrospect, but at the time he annoyed the heck out of me. I would try to do homework and he would basically whirlwind into my room like the Tasmanian devil from the cartoons, jumping on the bed and tackling me. He wanted a big brother, but the age gap made it hard for us to bond. Any of my spare time after marching band and homework was spent trying, unsuccessfully, to get a girlfriend, and I didn't treat him the way I should have. 2 years later, after a lot of therapy, I've stopped blaming myself as much. I know that it was natural to act the way I did, to feel the way I did, that even if he annoyed me, it didn't mean I didn't love him deeply. I know that I did. I know that I still do. When I went to UT for college, I met a couple people who were into spelunking. They didn't know about my brother and I never told them. I couldn't bring myself to tell my parents, knowing what they would think, but I picked it up fast, with a conviction that I knew was illogical. I wanted to find his body or find him. him. It was denial, I knew that much, but I had nightmares about him, nightmares that he was in that cave, in the dark screaming my name, but I couldn't find him. After nearly 3 years, they never stopped. My therapist had a whole bunch of thoughts on the matter, as did my parents, but I knew what would give me peace, in a way that nothing else could, finding his body. Partway through my freshman year, an opportunity presented itself. Kieran had fallen into a creek that went underground. Since then, we had had record drought and the creek was nearly dry. More than 2 years before, the team had explored everything they could, but the path of the water was not navigable. It was a tunnel completely filled with a fast current, too dangerous to try and send anyone down even with scuba gear. I needed to see what it looks like now. I should have told someone I was doing it, even just my friends that taught me caving. Instead, I drove back to my parents' neighborhood, took a dirt road into the forest, parked my car, and went back to the cave. For anyone not from that part of the country, it's all limestone. Water eats through it easily, and there are caves everywhere. Most of them aren't as deep as this particular, but it's normal if you have a few acres of land to have a cave on it. This particular one was in a gully a couple hundred yards from the house I grew up in. Getting my gear out of the trunk, I walked through the familiar hickory and maples, feet crunching on the dry leaves, down the rocky hill to the creek. The mouth of the cave was small, only about 2 feet high and 3 feet wide. I could still picture the yellow tape, the police officers directing volunteer search parties day and night. Standing there in the quiet forest, I stared at that black opening as I had so many times. Even though the cave was significant, they'd already explored everything they could, mapped it thoroughly. The water didn't even go over the top of the rocks in the bottom of it as I crawled through without getting wet, besides a little mud. I had the cave maps they made memorized, but still carried a laminated copy. Following the weak trickle of water, I crawled a little ways until the ceiling got high enough to walk if you kept your head down. All I had to do was follow the water about 100 feet, then see if the tunnel was clear. That was the only way its body could be. It smelled earthy, with decaying leaves in the weak flow. Looking back over my shoulder, I turned a bend and saw the last bit of reflected sunlight fade out of existence, leaving only my headlamp. Watching my step on the slick, muddy rock, a little salamander wriggled out of the way through the silty water. My heart was pounding in my chest as I made my way deeper into the earth, seeing how little water there was. Every inch of the cave had been checked, except for where I was headed. If the passage was clear, I would be the first person to ever go into that part of the cave. Well, the second. The black hole was shaped like an oval, a little over a foot tall and about 2 feet wide. 1 to 2 inches of water ran down the bottom of it. A knot formed in my throat, half feeling like I would cry and half feeling like I was scared. I knew that I should get someone else, but I couldn't stand thinking about what they would say. They would say there was no point, that the body would be washed too deep or buried, and that it could be too dangerous, and to let a professional do it. Instead of getting help, I began to drill. The rock was all limestone, and it didn't take too long to get 2 secure bolts drilled to anchor my rope. I put on my harness and got onto my stomach. It's hard to tell just how steep slopes are in a cave, but the water gave me a good idea. I would be squeezing through this hole and essentially rappelling down. Looking in with my headlamp, it seemed like the top was a narrow point and that it might open up. I'd never done anything this tight and steep with water in it, but something pushed me into that black opening, where I could hear water falling far below. Night after night of dreaming, Kieran was down there alone, screaming, terrified. It was a tight squeeze, tighter than I liked. To rappel, I had to have my face down toward the water and turn my head so that I could breathe. I inched down, struggling to use the equipment in the tight space. Progress was painfully slow, as I had to try and turn myself onto my left hip to reach the ATC scraping into the rock on my stomach. Getting out wouldn't be any easier. The rock pressed in on me harder and harder as the angle got steeper and steeper. I was essentially in a tiny tube with a waterfall, going more and more vertical. My problem was that the tube was not equally wide in all places. It was carved by water and would get narrower or wider on whims that I couldn't predict. I'd heard horror stories of Nutty Putty Cave, where the cavern got stuck in a vertical shaft like this one, and it didn't help. I was coming up on the narrowest part yet, but it looked like it would open up below that. I'd taken my helmet off so that I could squeeze through better. In the tight space with the water splashing my face and running through my shirt and pants, I began to feel fear. Not fear like you feel standing near a ledge. That's a manageable type of fear you can step back from. Not a fear that you feel in the pitch black, unsure of what's around you, you can just find a light. This was a fear beyond that. A fear that each foot of vertical rock builds incrementally inside of you as you know your escape becomes harder and harder. A fear that each pound of pressure as the rock smashes into your chest so that you can't breathe increases. A fear that right here, right right now. If you panic, you will die. I promised myself that my parents wouldn't lose 2 sons to this cave, that if it got any tighter, any steeper, I would turn around. Just before my will broke, my chest scraped through a tight spot, and the tunnel began to open. I almost dropped my helmet down the shaft, but managed to put it back on. From the sound of the water falling, I could tell I was entering a large chamber. Shining my light around, there was a domed ceiling with a few small stalactites. A huge murky pool of water was below me, and I couldn't see how deep it was. Large rocks were piled around the edges, and it seemed like the water was shallower on the other side. I rappelled down until my feet hit the water. They just kept going down and down until I was chest deep and stopped feeding rope. There was no way to know how deep the pool was, but I knew I would have to swim. The rope was my lifeline, and I couldn't leave it. I did an awkward side stroke, pulling with one arm and trying to feed out rope with the other underwater. I'd never tried it before, and I wouldn't recommend it. It sort of felt like I was going to drown, the weight of my clothes and shoes and the rope making it nearly impossible. Eventually, I made it 30 or so feet away from the waterfall, and felt my boots start to sink into silty mud. Drenched and breathing hard, I found a rock to sit on. I felt as if I might throw up from the exertion, now that the adrenaline was wearing off. A new sort of dread filled me as I looked around. This wasn't a small cave system, and I could hear the water going even deeper. I couldn't be sure, but it looked like there were other tunnels made by other water sources meeting up with this one. Should I follow the main current, as that was likely where Kieran's body would have gone, or should I try to thoroughly map every tunnel I could find branching off of this chamber? The memory of his loss was fresh in my mind, but it had been almost 3 years. What would I be looking for? What would be left of his body? Scraps of clothing or bones? Regardless of what my dreams told me, what else could there be? I had decided to take a few minutes to rest, to gather my thoughts. Rushing things wouldn't help. The sound of water was a white noise, and I began to look around more calmly. I noticed a pale little fish swimming in the murky pool in front of me. All I can remember was a loud cracking sound. Thank God I was wearing my helmet, or I would have been dead. It's strange how when you get hit on the head, you can lose your sight and sense of balance, but still hear things. I was shocked, but knew that I must have a concussion. There's no way for me to know if I was unconscious for a second or a minute, but I tried to scramble back to my feet in a panic. A rock had struck me from above. It must have come off of the steep side of the chamber, from a hidden ledge. My leg was hurt, I could tell that much. There was a sharp pulsing pain on my calf that I'd never felt. It was bad. I kicked my leg by reflex, only realizing consciously what my instincts had already figured out, only seeing the impossible as my dazed head turned around, and a scream escaped my mouth. He was eating me. The emaciated boy was pale as death, bloody teeth digging into my leg. Blind eyes were wide open, deep in their sockets above sunken cheeks. Over and over he bit me, with a hunger I could never understand. His arms were smaller than my wrists, his collarbones sticking from his chest. I grabbed his shoulder and threw him off of me in terror. He couldn't have weighed 30 pounds. For a second I saw him stand, my blood dripping from his mouth and over the ribs of his chest, before he ran into the darkness. Kieran. I screamed his name at the top of my lungs, went to chase him. Still confused from the head trauma, I was yanked backwards by the rope still attached to my harness. I frantically unlocked the carabiner and ran the way he had gone, ignoring the pain in my leg. Drops of black blood lead me to a low narrow tunnel. In my headlamp, I saw his little feet disappearing around a corner. The crack he had squeezed through was impossibly small, I could never fit into it. Kieran, it's me, it's Chris, it's me. I began sobbing. Why couldn't I have grabbed him? If I just grabbed one of those tiny arms, I could have hugged him, told him I loved him, brought him back to the sun. Mom and Dad love you, they miss you, I miss you. I yelled over the sound of the waterfall. I kept saying anything I could think of. I said that I had food, tried to wrinkle the wrapper of a granola bar as loudly as I could, told him that he could go home, screamed until I collapsed on the wet rock. In my mind, the last almost 3 years had been hard. What were they for him, alone in the dark, eating anything that swam or crawled he could get his hands on? He was only 5 at the time and would be almost 8 now. Would he be insane? Remember who I was, or even who he himself was? Looking down, a trickle of blood went into the main pool, dyeing it a dark color at the edge. I was bleeding a lot. If I didn't stop it, I wouldn't make the climb back up, and no one would know that either of us was down here. Wrapping the leg as tightly as I could, it kept bleeding. I didn't really have the tools to make a proper tourniquet, but tightened the knot as hard as I could until I screamed. Before I went, I left the granola bar unwrapped at the base of the crack Kieran had gone through, along with a spare headlamp turned onto the lowest setting. I screamed that I would be back, promised him, before eventually turning back to the pool. I pulled myself along the rope to the base of the waterfall. Painfully, I made my way back up it, and somehow squeezed through the crack. I barely remember, to be honest, just the suffering of it and wanting to give up. I didn't give up though, half for myself and half for Kieran. At the mouth of the cave, I collapsed. Seeing the sun brought me to my senses just a little. I called my mom and she answered. I told her I was at the cave out back, that I was hurt, that I had found Kieran. I told her to call an ambulance. The leg is okay, I will be able to use it just fine, even though the scar will never heal. There was too much tissue missing. At the hospital, the doctors agreed that the injury on my leg was from being bitten, probably by a child based on the tooth marks. That fact alone was the only reason I could convince anyone that he was still down there, still alive. It seemed impossible, but he must have been eating the fish, or anything else he could find. They sent down a search party, but no one can fit into a lot of the tunnels he might have gone down. My parents are a wreck, understandably. Even 3 days later, my dad is hysterical and my mom is just quiet. They wanted to go down to try and talk to him, but there's no way they would make the climb. I barely did. The rescue teams couldn't find him, and the tunnel is completely impassable to anyone other than a starved child. No one has seen him, but they put food in the crack I last saw him in, and when they came back the next day, it was gone. I never gave up on him, and I still haven't. Right now, the plan is to leave as much food as we can, and hope that the rain forecast tomorrow isn't enough to fill the cave. My friends won't believe me, my family thinks I'm crazy, and if I keep trying to convince them, they're probably just going to lock me up. But I need help, and I think that strangers online are my last hope, so I'm begging. If you meet me, if you see me walking down the street and I say hello, if you meet me in a bar and feel inclined to buy me a drink, or if you match with me on a dating app and make plans, kill me. End it. I don't care how it's done. I'd prefer it to be as painful as possible, but I know that's probably a lot to ask. It's already a lot to ask someone who doesn't know me to commit murder on my behalf, and I'm sorry to put such a burden on you, but I truly can't do this any longer. Let me provide you with some context. I might have gotten ahead of myself, but I came on too strong. Don't leave yet, please. At least let me explain to you what's been going on. Maybe, hopefully, once you hear this, you'll be on my side. Maybe you'll believe me. Hell, maybe you've experienced this too. I can't be the only one who has experienced this. It started 2 months ago at Meech's. Meech's is a small bar that my friends and I used to go to every Friday night. They had a karaoke night and everyone got free nachos with the purchase of a drink. It was a routine we had been sticking to for almost a year now, ever since Melly moved into the apartment complex down the street and found the place. Anyway, it was a Friday night, probably around 10 p.m. because I remember that Jonas had just arrived and he got off his shift at the hospital at 9 on those days. Melly and I had just performed a tipsy version of Fleetwood Mac's Rhiannon, and we were giggling and stumbling back to our booth when he intercepted our path. He said his name was Tony, short for Antonio. He said he was new in the city and had just moved here from Idaho or Iowa, I don't really remember. He wanted to talk to me, he said I had a nice voice, and he enjoyed my performance, and he would like to get to know me a bit better. I agreed because he was my type. Dark hair, green eyes, stubble on his jawline. He smelled like Tide laundry detergent and something else that reminded me of my childhood friend Istra's house. It felt familiar to me, and so I followed him to a booth near my friends, and we talked for the entire night. Our first date was dinner and a movie, a classic first date. We watched Heart Eyes, which he loved, but I said wasn't my style. We went to this expensive French restaurant after, a small place that was almost an hour away, and we had wine and ate our dinner while a woman sat in the corner of the room and sang La Vie en Rose. It was romantic, he was romantic, it was a great date. The first bad sign didn't feel like a bad sign when it happened. You know what they say about hindsight? It started with him going by his full name instead of Tony. He said he had always gone by Tony because he preferred it. He thought Antonio was a mouthful, that Tony made him sound like a fun, easygoing guy while Antonio made him sound like the opposite. And then, that day, he changed his mind. "You've never gone by Ella or Stell?" he asked me one evening as we were walking through a small street fair that the city put on every year. Nope, just Stella. I've always been completely Stella," I replied as I took a sip of my soda. "Really? You've never gone by a nickname? Not even as a child?" I shook my head no again. I remember this conversation vividly now. I have forgotten about it soon after it happened because it seemed irrelevant at the time, but as soon as I realized what was going on, it popped back into my mind like someone had dug into my subconscious and pulled it out, projecting it onto a big screen right in my face. After that, he decided he wanted to be Antonio. He wanted to be completely Antonio. After that step was done, the rest came quicker and quicker, like an avalanche headed downhill until it spiraled out of control. He changed his hair, dyed it a lighter brown like mine. His eyes, which I swear to all of the gods were green when I met him, were now dark brown like mine. He got slimmer, losing his broad shoulders almost overnight. His face got rounder, softer, and less angular. He shrank 3 inches. Then he took my jokes, stole my bits, and started saying things that only I would say. Even my friends would comment on it, albeit in an innocent way. Oh my god, that's such a Stella thing to say. Aw, that's so cute. You guys are becoming like the same person. Ugh, I love when couples start to adapt each other's mannerisms. Except we weren't doing that. He was stealing all of my jokes. He was taking all of my catchphrases. He would use my references that he didn't even know previously. He stole my style, swapping out his Vans, jeans, and button-up shirts for thrifted boots and band tees. He got glasses even though he didn't need them, and he went vegetarian. The worst part about this, the part that pissed me off the most as this was taking place, was the fact that everyone acted like I was insane. They acted like he had always been like that. He never went by Tony. Stella, what are you talking about? His eyes were never green. I think you're misremembering. Maybe it was the lighting in the bar that night. He's always been the exact same height as you. It's impossible for someone to just shrink. It was such bull crap. It's making me mad all over again to think about it now. Nobody believed me. I tried showing them photos where you could clearly see the differences, and it was like they didn't notice them, like I was the only one who could see the photo as is. I need to calm down. I'm not finished telling you my story, and I worry about you getting bored. I need you to believe me. So, would you believe me when I tell you that about 2 weeks ago he became me? I mean, he literally became me. He morphed into a clone of me. He goes by my name, he wears my face, and hangs out with my friends. I almost had a heart attack when I saw it the first time. It was like I was looking in a mirror, a screwed up mirror who had taken over my life. My friends acted like nothing was wrong, like he had always looked like that. They didn't think we looked alike at all. They didn't think it was weird that we had the same name. Everything was just a big, fat, stupid coincidence to them. It's so infuriating it almost makes me laugh. So that's where we are now. He, or I don't know, it can't be human, can it? Whatever it is has become me, and it's ruining my life. He picks up my medications, takes my esthetician appointments, takes my Pilates classes, hangs out with my family, everything. I need you to kill him. Me. Something needs to die, please. My name is Stella Kobe. I'm 5 feet 5 inches. Short brown hair, curly collarbone length, brown eyes, big glasses with thick red frames. I've got a tattoo of a skull on the inside of my right wrist, and a 4-inch long scar that runs down the back of my right arm, down my elbow. It's from when I fell off a horse as a child. I'm 156 pounds, and I'm a big fan of rock music, specifically Blondie. I love action movies, and I'm allergic to cinnamon. You might meet me out in public in the produce section of your local supermarket, maybe on Bumble or Hinge or Grindr. I'm in thrift stores a lot, maybe watch out for me there. You'll know it's not the real me because I haven't left my apartment in over a week, and I have no plans of doing so. I want that thing gone. I want it gone from this world before I ever step foot outside again. I don't know how it picks its victims, but it's quite charming. Just be careful. You can try to avoid it if you want, but your best bet is to just kill it and put an end to this thing. So please, if you meet me, if you meet it as me, please kill it. Growing up, Christmas was magical. The tree glowing softly in the corner, the smell of gingerbread wafting through the house, and the laughter of my family made it feel like nothing could ever go wrong. But there was one tradition that always felt off. Every Christmas Eve, just before bed, my parents would gather us around the fireplace. They'd turn off all the lights except for the glow of the fire and hand each of us a small bell. "Shake it once for Santa," Dad would say with a smile. "He needs to hear you." So we did. We'd each shake our bells in unison, filling the room with soft jingling, and then my parents would blow out the fire. And that was it. When I was young, I never thought twice about it, but as I got older, I started to notice strange things. The next morning, the fire would always be relit, even though no one got up to do it. There were faint charred handprints on the bricks surrounding the fireplace. One year when I was about 12, I asked my mom why we did it. Her face turned pale. "It's just tradition," she said, brushing me off. But that answer wasn't enough. Last Last Christmas, I decided to stay up. I was 16 and too curious for my own good. My parents and little brother had gone to bed, the house was silent, and the fire had been snuffed out. I sat in the dark, the faint scent of smoke lingering in the air, waiting. At first, nothing happened. I almost gave up and went to bed. Then I heard it, a faint jingling like someone shaking a bell far off in the distance. I froze. The sound grew louder, closer, until it was coming from the chimney itself. I held my breath, staring at the dark opening, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst. Something moved. I didn't see it at first, but I felt it. The cold draft that followed as a tall, gaunt figure emerged from the chimney. Its limbs were unnaturally long, its head bent to fit under the low ceiling. Its skin was ashen, flaking, with dark burns trailing up its arms, and it was holding a bell. It raised the bell slowly and shook it once, the sound sharp and clear in the silent room. I couldn't move, its head turned toward me, hollow eyes boring into mine. A jagged smile spread across its face as it whispered in a voice that sounded like crackling fire. "You're not supposed to watch." The room went black. I woke up in my bed the next morning, trembling, my clothes reeking of smoke. My parents acted like nothing had happened, but when I went downstairs I saw a fresh set of charred handprints on the fireplace and a bell sitting on the mantle. I haven't shaken a bell since, but every Christmas Eve I hear it, and every year it gets louder. I'm a med student. I was just meant to observe, maybe assist. Nothing in our textbooks or training prepares you for this. I'm writing this from my locked bedroom as something he moves around my house like an animal, only quieter, more intentional, please. Someone tell me what to do. I don't know how long the door will hold. It started 3 weeks ago. I'd only just begun my first rotation, internal medicine. I was shadowing my supervising doctor at St. Thomas's. He was sharp, old school, always wore a bow tie and never seemed rattled. I looked up to him, still do. The man didn't blink during a code blue, but he'd always said, "It's the quiet ones you watch closely, not the screamers, the ones who smile when they shouldn't." I didn't get it at the time. My first solo case, just a basic consult, but my supervising doctor let me take the lead, was a man listed as patient 46B, mid-30s. Slight build, no emergency, no urgent flags, just unexplained bruising. He sat calmly in the consult room, no obvious injuries, pale, thin lips, brown hair that hung limp like it had given up, but his eyes, that was the first thing. They were gray, not blue-gray or hazel gray, just gray, unsettlingly blank like a fogged-over mirror. He spoke slowly, politely, his voice low and toneless. Said the bruises started appearing 3 months ago. Inner thighs, upper arms, spine, places you'd expect with abuse or a bleeding disorder. I examined him, and yes, there were bruises, but they were wrong. The edges weren't purple or yellowing like healing ones. They were pitch black with a red core, as if something inside was trying to get out. I remember asking if he was on any blood thinners. He said no. I asked about substance use, alcohol, anticoagulants. Never touched a drop, he replied with a smile that felt like someone else's mouth wearing his face. I was unsettled, but I had to write something down, so I chalked it up as possible immune thrombocytopenia, gave him a mild corticosteroid prescription, and told him to return in a week. "We'll run more tests," I said, "probably nothing to worry about." I regret those words. When he returned a week later, things escalated. He looked thinner, same dark clothes, same blank expression, but there were more bruises, his neck now around his jawline and several across his scalp like blotches of ink. He didn't sit this time. He stood in the corner of the consult room, facing the wall like he was in timeout. "Lucas," I asked. That was the only name he'd given. "You okay?" "I can hear them now," he whispered, "in the walls. They want out, but they like you." I glanced at the mirror, wondering if this was some elaborate psych eval trick, but it was just me, alone, with him. He finally turned. His pupils were dilated, almost consuming the irises, and there was blood under his fingernails. "I don't scratch," he said, as if reading my mind. "They move around inside me. I'm not doing it." I referred him to our liaison psychiatrist. I also requested a follow-up with internal. Something didn't add up, physically or mentally. "We'll get you seen again soon," I told him. "Just hang in there, okay?" He nodded. "You should lock your doors more, especially after dark. You're warm. They'd like to wear you." The next day, I visited the psychiatrist's office to check in on the referral. The secretary looked up, confused at first, then her expression shifted, something quieter, tinged with sadness. "He hasn't come in. You haven't heard?" "Heard what?" She hesitated. "He was found dead last night, bludgeoned, in his office." Police think it happened after hours. We're closed today for... I was already walking away, ears buzzing. I didn't want to believe it was connected, couldn't be, but I felt it in my gut. I called the station, asked to speak with the detective in charge. I got bounced around until someone finally took me semi-seriously. Yes, the voice on the other end said, "We're looking for a patient, mid-30s, gave the name Lucas, used a fake address on the intake form, no ID, we're advising all staff at St. Thomas's to stay alert and avoid contact." The detective lowered his voice. "We found things in Dr. P's office, blood in places it shouldn't be, symbols carved into the carpet beneath his chair, and something under his fingernails, not human. That was 12 hours ago. I've been trying to act normal since. I finished my shift early, told the nurse I had a migraine, took the tram home looking over my shoulder the whole time, and now this. I came home and the house was dark. I live alone in a 2-story terrace. Usually it feels cozy, not tonight. I locked the door, flicked the hallway light on. He was there, not standing, on the ceiling, pressed against it like a spider, barefoot, clothes torn, skin too pale, almost translucent now. The bruises had overtaken his limbs, crawling up his face in broken, inky veins. But it was his expression that paralyzed me. A smile so wide it stretched unnaturally, as if his cheeks were tearing from the force of it. His eyes, they were solid black now, not just the irises, all of them. Like 2 obsidian marbles reflecting my horror back at me. He didn't speak, he just moved, not like a person. His limbs twisted at angles no joint should allow, slow and jerky like a puppet handled by someone who's never seen one before. He crept across the ceiling, toward me. I wanted to scream but couldn't. My throat locked up, I stumbled backward, hands shaking, keys falling to the floor. He dropped. No sound, just thud, right in front of the door, blocking it. Standing there now, head tilted, arms hanging limp, still smiling. I ran, bolted up the stairs, locked myself in the bedroom. I've barricaded it with a chair and a shelf. I don't know if it'll matter. He hasn't spoken once, but he's knocking now. Not on the door, on the walls, knock, knock, knock. Then silence. Then knocking from the other side of the room. I swear to God I heard him giggling. I called the police. They said they'd dispatched someone, but there's been a surge of emergencies. Said it'll take 30 minutes minimum. I tried to explain that a patient might have killed a psychiatrist and is now in my house. They said, "Try to stay calm, sir. Maybe step outside." I can't. He's everywhere. The lights keep flickering. My phone battery's at 9%. I can hear him moving in the ceiling above me now. Sometimes dragging something, sometimes whispering my name over and over, "Doctor." Shh. There's a scratching coming from inside the closet. I didn't check it. I didn't think to wait. Oh God. The closet door just creaked open. It's pitch black in there, but I can see something moving. Long limbs, that smile. He was never downstairs. He's been in here the whole time. Please, someone tell me what to do. I'm posting this in case I don't make it. The cops are 20 minutes away now. My bedroom door just creaked. Update. Noises have stopped. No knocking, no whispering, just silence. I think he's waiting. If you read this, please share it. And if a patient with gray eyes, blood under his nails and bruises that don't heal ever walks into your clinic, run. I never thought I'd be writing this, but I feel like I need to tell someone what's happened. Jake and I had been together for 3 years when we started talking about getting engaged. We both loved antiques, you know, items with history and stories embedded in them. Every weekend we'd hunt together through antique shops and estate sales, searching for all sorts of forgotten treasures. That's how we found the ring. The perfect ring. At least that's how it felt then. It sat in a locked case at Madame Eloise's shop downtown. A deep blue sapphire set in an intricate gold band with delicate filigree. Art Deco, unique, perfect. I knew it immediately. Jake, ever the romantic, insisted on buying it then and there. He shooed me from the store, promising to make it special. 2 weeks later, on a warm evening, he led me to our favorite park bench beneath the willow tree we always loved. He knelt, eyes bright with excitement, and presented a small velvet box. I knew what was inside before he even opened it, but when my eyes finally fell on the ring itself, my heart stuttered and I seemed to forget everything I knew. My mind went blank. "Where did you get this?" I asked, fingers hovering over the gold band. Jake grinned. "You know where?" And I did know, of course. My brain was just temporarily mush, I guess. It was the ring from Madame Eloise's shop, but inside the band something new gleamed under the lamplight, an engraving, LM and JC. I ran my thumb over the initials, Lucy M and Jake C. Jake shrugged. It was already there, fate, right? The night air seemed to press around us. Something cold curled in my stomach. What are the odds? I whispered. I'm not a statistician, Jake laughed, but I think it was meant to be. We drank champagne under the willow, and I fell asleep that night with the ring on my finger, feeling like the luckiest woman alive. Then the nightmare started. I dreamed of a bride in a blood-spattered church sobbing behind her veil. When she turned to face me, her face was bruised and tear-streaked. I woke gasping for air, my chest feeling like it was about to explode. Bad dream, Jake mumbled, pulling me closer. Just nerves, I lied, glancing at the sapphire gleaming in the darkness. The next morning things got so much worse. My neighbor waved as I collected the mail. The sapphire caught the sunlight, flashing blue for just a second. 5 minutes later, her brakes failed as she backed out of her driveway. Her car plowed into an oncoming delivery truck. I watched paramedics pull her mangled body from the wreckage. I tried to convince myself it was a horrible coincidence, 1 in a billion or something, but then my boss dropped dead during a meeting later that afternoon, just moments after complimenting my ring. An aneurysm, they said. I saw how his eyes fixed on the sapphire right before blood trickled from his ears. Deep down, I knew I had been cursed by the ring I loved so much. I had become a walking omen of death. On my way home that night, still in shock, I witnessed a man glance at me, then climb up to the ledge of my apartment building and jump without hesitation. The thud his body made when it hit the pavement will haunt me forever. His dead eyes found mine in the crowd. I clutched my hand to my chest, and the sapphire felt warm against my skin, too warm. When I looked down, I noticed a faint burn mark on my skin. Around midnight, I decided it was time to remove the ring, but my finger had swollen. The band wouldn't budge at all. No amount of soap, ice, or oil could loosen it. As the days continued, so did the deaths. A barista touched my hand while returning change. Minutes later, he choked to death on a scone as I waited for my cold brew. An elderly woman who admired my ring at the grocery store was crushed beneath collapsing shelves moments later. At dinner with friends, I kept my hands hidden under the table, but Melissa insisted on seeing the ring. The moment the sapphire caught the light, a waiter carrying Cherry's Jubilee tripped. The dessert's high-proof alcohol splashed across nearby tables, igniting instantly. The entire restaurant went up in flames. In the chaos, I watched Melissa's hair ignite, her screams swallowed by the roaring inferno. Only Jake and I walked out unscathed. After 8 deaths in a week, I was desperate. I started keeping my left hand hidden whenever I was out in public, stuffing it deep into my pants or coat pockets. I also began Googling the ring online. It was such a luxurious and unique ring, I was curious if it had a history. It didn't take long to find the original owners, Lydia M and James C. L. M and JC, just like our initials. The newspaper article from 1952 was brief but chilling. Local bride found slain on wedding night. The accompanying photos showed Lydia wearing my ring, and she looked just like the woman in my dreams. Something else disturbed me too. Jake had changed. His once warm brown eyes now seemed glassy and unfamiliar. Sometimes I'd catch him staring at the ring with an expression I didn't recognize. Possessive, hungry. When I mentioned the deaths, he'd shrug them off as coincidences. When I suggested we research the ring's history together, he changed the subject. I began to research alone, visiting libraries and local historical societies. I found more articles about Lydia and James. They'd been high school sweethearts. James had given Lydia the sapphire ring as a symbol of his undying love, a family heirloom passed down through generations. But on their wedding night, something had gone terribly wrong. The police found Lydia's body in their honeymoon suite, strangled. James was nowhere to be found. For weeks, the papers speculated about his whereabouts. Had he killed his bride and fled? Had they both been victims of a robbery gone wrong? 6 months later, James's body washed up on a riverbank 50 miles downstream from the bridge where his car had been found abandoned. His death was ruled a suicide. In my search, I discovered an old woman who claimed to be Lydia's cousin. She lived in a nursing home on the outskirts of town. When I visited her, she recognized the ring immediately immediately. You need to get rid of it, she whispered, her papery hand clutching mine. It was cursed by James's great-grandmother, a woman scorned. She wanted revenge on the family that had rejected her, so she placed a curse on the ring. It brings death to anyone who sees it, except for the wearer and their beloved. She leaned closer, but there's a price for that protection. What price? I asked. I think your souls, she said. I can't be certain. I only know James wasn't himself after he gave Lydia that ring. It changed both of them over time. The night he killed her, his eyes were different. I had seen them myself, empty, like you were staring through a window. Like Jake's eyes now. The old woman told me how to remove the ring. It had to be done on a new moon. There was a mixture I needed to prepare. Herbs and oils and other things I won't mention here. The process would be painful, but it was the only way. The next new moon, I prepared everything as I was told. Jake watched with those unfamiliar glassy eyes as I submerged my hand in the mixture. The pain was excruciating. My skin blistered on contact, but it worked. The ring loosened. With one final agonizing pull, I wrenched the ring free. My finger came with it, severed cleanly at the knuckle. Blood poured from the wound, but I felt only relief as the sapphire glowed with rage. Jake lunged for the ring, but I was faster. I dropped it into a cloth bag and tied it with red thread 7 times exactly as instructed. We drove to the old bridge at the edge of town. The bag seemed to get heavier with each mile, and I could swear I heard scratching coming from inside it. At the center of the bridge, we stood in darkness, staring at the black water below. No moon reflected on its surface. Are you sure? Jake asked, his voice finally his own again. I nodded, clutching my bandaged hand. It has to end. He held the bag over the railing. For a moment, it seemed like he couldn't let go, like the bag was stuck to his hand. Then, with visible effort, Jake opened his fingers. The splash below was small. The ripples disappeared quickly. It's been 3 weeks, no accidents, no deaths. Jake is himself again, though he remembers everything. We both do. When Jake and I drive over that bridge, we both fall silent, staring at the water below. Sometimes I dream of the river bottom, of silt slowly covering the cloth bag, of water flowing endlessly over hidden things. In these dreams, I see fish swimming near the bag, then darting away suddenly. The ring is down there, waiting. Is it truly contained, or simply biding its time? When I wake from these dreams, my missing finger throbs with phantom pain, and I wonder if somewhere in the darkness of the river, a sapphire pulses an answer. I'd like to start off with an apology. If I am correct, I may just have killed you and everyone you know. Hopefully that isn't the case, but if it is, sorry. I've been working as an immunologist for the past 17 years, and I'm quite well known for my work. Throughout my life, I've lost people I cared about to disease. My mother died from tuberculosis when I was 5. My best friend died of leukemia when I was 16, and my father has recently been diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. I've always viewed it as a malicious and evil thing that robs us of our family and friends. It's for this reason that I chose to study the immune system. It's truly a fascinating thing. Our bodies are somehow incredibly resilient and terribly delicate at the same time. My goal was to contribute to the eradication of disease. Well, I suppose the same can be said for all immunologists, but I worked with a fiery hatred for pestilence and sickness. I wanted, in a sense, to get revenge on the being I had made up in my head, this evil figure I had conjured up to personify disease. I was after more than just one. I didn't want to be the man who ended cancer or AIDS. I wanted to rid humanity of the greatest threat it ever had. My goal was to end as many diseases as I possibly could with one strike. I'll keep my explanations as brief as I can. I know you didn't come here for a science lesson. The human immune system is incredibly complex and has a vast array of countermeasures it uses to kill off pathogens. However, this all relies on the first step of the process, recognition. In order for anything to happen, some immune cell needs to come into contact with the foreign body afflicting the host. This can be any number of cells: T cells, B cells, macrophages, dendritic cells, NK cells, the list goes on. Once this happens, receptors on these cells bind to specific surface proteins on the pathogen, which starts the next step of the process. The pathogen is engulfed and digested. Afterwards, the cell takes pieces of this now dead pathogen and brings it to other immune cells to activate activate more immune responses. After a long list of signaling pathways, the host produces antibodies which bind to the pathogens and flag them for destruction. Later, when one of the many killer cells encounters a pathogen marked by antibodies, it will be swiftly eliminated. This process can apply to all types of diseases, bacterial, viral, even cancers. So why can't we just synthetically make a bunch of antibodies and shoot them into sick people? Well, there are many reasons actually, but one of them is the issue of immune response recognition. When your immune system goes out to kill targeted cells, how does it know which cells are good and which are bad? The answer is a molecule called sialic acid. Your cells produce this on their surfaces so that even if an immune cell binds to them, it can recognize the sialic acid structures on the surface and move on from it. But some diseases, disgusting and vile as they are, have evolved to use this to their advantage. Some of the most dangerous diseases are able to coat themselves in sialic acid in order to evade immune detection. For example, influenza binds to sialic acid on respiratory cells to gain entry into your lungs. Some bacteria like Neisseria meningitidis actually steal sialic acid from their host to create a disguise. And one of the reasons cancer is so difficult to treat is that cancer cells overproduce sialic acid, effectively wearing a do not kill sign that prevents immune cells from recognizing them as threats. This allows all of them to go about their business, killing innocent people and spreading to others. To combat this, humans have developed a treatment, one mainly for cancer, using sialidase, an enzyme that breaks down sialic acid from molecules. Think of this as a chainsaw that cuts off sialic acid and allows the bad cells to be recognized by your immune system. There's only one problem with this: sialidase is not specific. It will rip off sialic acid from your own cells if it comes into contact with them. But in this enzyme, I saw the key to free us all of the burden of sickness. If I could use a vehicle to ensure that sialidase only comes into contact with non-self cells, I would be able to strip away their advantage and expose them to the immune system. And I had the perfect one. It feels strange to condense years of my life and hard work into just a few sentences. In my studies, I became deeply familiar with the measles virus, an endlessly fascinating entity. You see, measles causes infected cells to fuse together, forming massive clumps called syncytia. If I could modify the virus to carry the sialidase enzyme, these clusters would become their own undoing. As the cells fused, sialidase would strip away the sialic acid from all of them at once, leaving them completely exposed to the immune system's wrath. That's exactly what I did. It was tested on rodents a week ago and it worked perfectly. But when I tried to get this new treatment approved, I was shot down almost immediately. I was outraged. I had invented a way to eradicate a plethora of life-threatening diseases, and this miracle cure wasn't even going to be considered. Unfortunately, I took matters into my own hands. This drug was going to save my father, I knew it. So I went to the hospital he was being treated at. He's been spending most of his time sleeping. Cancer has a way of draining energy from its victims. I injected him with my treatment quickly. He didn't even wake up. Satisfied, I left the hospital and headed to the lab. The rats needed feeding, and then I could finally relax at home. Only when I saw the rats did I realize my error. In my fervor to create this miracle cure, I had made the same mistake that the human immune system does. I hadn't been specific enough. My goal was to make the measles virus, with sialidase attached to it, bind to any foreign bodies and force them to clump together. This would then allow the enzyme to remove the sialic acid from all of the pathogens and allow them all to be recognized by the immune system. But sialidase isn't specific. It had shorn off the protein that causes the measles virus to bind. The result of this was a free-floating virus that could bind to any cell and shear off its sialic acid, making it a target for the host's immune system. The rats in their cages had partially liquefied, their bodies reduced to a putrid gelatinous slurry. Only a few fragments of bone and shredded tissue remained, barely recognizable as what had once been living creatures. A rancid mix of blood and dissolved flesh pooled at the bottom of the cages, the stench thick and suffocating. Without another thought, I rushed back to the hospital, back to my father's room, but it was too late. I'm not sure why, but it acted quickly, far more so than it had with the rats. My dad had woken from from his sleep with agonizing screams. Blood ran from every orifice, his eyes, his nose, his ears, and mouth. He reached out a semi-solid hand towards me. I could see the veins and muscles through his skin. As he reached out, his hand fell from his arm and splattered onto the floor by my feet. His now milky white eyes rolled into his skull as he fell back into bed, motionless. His torso caved in on itself, exposing his liquefied organs to the open air. His body was eating itself because of what I had done. Nurses and doctors rushed in and out of the room, but I knew they wouldn't be able to help. An older nurse grabbed my arm and led me outside, but I couldn't hear his words. My ears rung from what I had seen, what I had caused. I vomited in the flower bed. I didn't know what else to do, so I went home where I'm now drafting this up. There's one more detail about the measles virus that I didn't mention. It's highly contagious. In fact, in unvaccinated populations, it has a 100% infection rate. Not that a vaccine would help anymore. I've modified the virus to the point where a new vaccine would need to be developed, but judging by how fast it worked on my father, I don't think we have that kind of time. Every single one of the people who were in that hospital likely have it, me included. By tomorrow, hundreds of people will be infected. A week from now, thousands or more, but chances are I'll be dead by then. I truly hope I'm wrong, but if I'm not, I really am sorry. To anyone who finds this message, my name doesn't matter, but my story might. I am, or rather, I was a lead engineer at a top secret research facility deep beneath the ice of Antarctica. Our mission was simple: to explore and harness the power of an ancient technology buried miles below the frozen surface. What we discovered was something that should never have been awakened. The project, known as Obsidian, a codename we now know was more fitting than we ever realized, began with the discovery of a massive, perfectly preserved structure detected via satellite scans. This structure, buried under 4 miles of solid ice, was unlike anything on Earth, an impossibly smooth obsidian black pyramid emitting faint electromagnetic pulses. In December 2021, my team was dispatched to the site with cutting-edge drilling equipment to breach the ice and gain access. The project was classified at the highest levels of global security. Only a handful of people even knew it existed. As we tunneled closer, the pulses grew stronger, and our instruments started behaving erratically. Computers failed, compasses spun wildly, and even our most advanced communication systems flickered and died. On January 10th, 2022, we finally reached the pyramid's surface. The surrounding ice had an unnatural, almost glossy sheen, and the air grew thick with static electricity. Ignoring every instinct, we set up our equipment and prepared to enter. The entrance was sealed with a door made from a material that defied all analysis, neither metal nor stone. It absorbed all light, rendering it nearly invisible to the naked eye. When we finally breached it, we found an empty chamber lined with glyphs that emitted a dim, pulsating glow. At the center of the room stood a large, perfectly circular hole descending into darkness. It was around this point that things began to spiral out of control. Without warning, the glyphs started to pulse faster, and an oppressive force filled the chamber, pressing down on us as if the air itself had turned to lead. We attempted to retreat, but the hole began to emit a low thrumming noise, a sound that resonated deep within our bones. As we watched, paralyzed with terror, something began to rise from the depths. A shape of a void, darker than the darkest night, emerged from the hole. It was amorphous, shifting, and yet there was a terrifying sense of intelligence behind it. It filled the room with an overwhelming presence, a crushing sense of despair and doom. The surrounding air warped and twisted as the entity began to take a vaguely humanoid form. We couldn't move, couldn't speak. The only sound was the relentless hum, growing louder and more unbearable with each passing second. Then, in a voice that bypassed our ears and spoke directly into our minds, it said, "You have trespassed into the domain of the eternal void. You are the first to awaken us in eons, and for this your world will suffer. We are the ones who came before, and we shall reclaim what was lost. You cannot stop what has begun." The entity dissipated into the air, leaving us with a chilling coldness that seeped into our very souls. We fled, abandoning all equipment and sealing the entrance behind us, but it was too late. The pyramid began to emit pulses of energy at an ever-increasing rate, and we realized with dawning horror that it was was a beacon, a call to something far beyond our comprehension. As I write this, I am the last surviving member of my team. The others are gone, vanished without a trace, consumed by whatever we unleashed. The facility is on lockdown, but I fear it's only a matter of time before the energy pulses reach their peak and whatever lies on the other side answers the call. I don't know how much longer I have, but you need to understand, this isn't just a threat to us, but to all of humanity. Do not attempt to access the Obsidian Pyramid. Do not go near it. Know that the end we have set in motion cannot be undone. If you receive this, pray that it's not too late. I barged through my front door and sprinted up the stairs. I made a run for the bedroom door before kicking it open. "I know he's in here. Where are you hiding him this time?" I screamed. My wife Susan was shocked to see me back from work and was sitting in bed reading a book. "I don't know what you are talking about, honey. I've been here all morning." I could tell from the red glow on my wife's cheeks and the beads of sweat rolling down her forehead she was doing more than reading a book. "I know that scumbag is here. I can still smell his stinking aftershave." I grabbed the blankets and ripped them off the bed. Susan tried her best to cover her naked body. "It's 2 in the afternoon. Why are you in bed naked?" Susan looked like a rabbit caught in a headlight. She stuttered as her brain tried to make up a plausible answer. I began tearing the room apart when suddenly I heard the sound of labored breathing coming from the closet. I felt a rage of red mist descend upon me before whipping open the closet doors. As I drove back to work, I couldn't get the image of Mason Bradley and his fat gut on top of my wife. Intrusive thoughts about my wife's infidelities permeated my mind as I drove my truck. At 37, my life wasn't where I expected it to be. My dreams of running my own company were as broken as the beat-up pickup truck I used to drive to work. My truck rumbled up to the gates of the steel mill. The security guard at the gate barely acknowledged my existence as the truck roared past him. As I turned into the car park, I noticed my boss Big Ed waiting for me. As I got out of my truck, Big Ed came scurrying over. For a man who ran $1 million company, he always looked as if he was out panhandling for his next meal. His slacks were 2 sizes too big and he wore the same t-shirt every day. "What are you doing tomorrow, Jack?" I hated how Big Ed spoke to me. He had a habit of spitting after every sentence and would sometimes spit directly at me. "I was going to surprise my wife tomorrow and take her somewhere nice." Big Ed hitched his slacks up onto his gut. "Listen here now, Jack. My car's been giving me some trouble and I need you to service her. Couldn't you get someone else to do it?" I could tell he was getting annoyed with my attitude. "If you want your job Monday, you will do what you're told." He had me over a barrel and knew I couldn't afford to lose the only job the town had to offer. "I'll be over first thing in the morning." I arrived at Ed's dilapidated mansion. Ed was outside with his car swooning over her like it was some beautiful young woman. His face lit up as he ran his hands over the bonnet of the truck. "Be gentle with her, she's all I got," said Ed. Ed looked slightly smarter than his usual unkempt manner. "You got a date, Ed?" "When the cats are away, the mice will play," said Ed as he gave me a mischievous wink. Ed pulled a red handkerchief from his back pocket and wiped the sweat from his forehead. "I see one scratch on her and I will snap your neck." I was weary from a long day babysitting Ed's car. All I wanted to do was throw my feet up and have a nice cold beer. I stepped in my front door and was suddenly hit by a familiar smell. It smelt like Big Ed's nasty cologne, but I was too tired to take much notice. My body ached as I grabbed a beer from the kitchen before collapsing onto my chair. As I sat there, sipping beer and reevaluating my life's predicaments, I noticed something sticking from the armrest of my couch. I walked over and picked up the red piece of cloth. The same red piece of cloth Big Ed used to wipe the beady sweat from his grubby forehead. I unfolded the cloth, and to my dismay, there was Ed's name embroidered in the hanky. I was heartbroken and furious. I knew what it meant, and all I wanted to do was tear the house down with my bare hands, but I knew better than to let my anger get the best of me. My eyes welled up as I sped down the country road. I turned the radio up full blast to drown out my intrusive thoughts. I was too embroiled in a battle with my conciseness to notice the dark figure walking in the middle of the road. By the time I noticed it was too late, I slammed on the brakes and covered my eyes before the car came to a halt. To my relief, I couldn't find any signs of someone injured. I convinced myself stress was making me go crazy. As I tried jumping back in my truck, I heard someone approaching from behind. "Having trouble, buddy?" I felt a cold chill up my spine. Something was telling me to run, but my legs had turned to jelly from fear. A dark figure stepped out from the shadows of the looming trees overhead. "I thought I had hit someone with my truck," I nervously explained. I couldn't make out who I was talking to. All I could see was an outline of a tall, dark figure. "I hear you're having trouble with your wife." "Do I know you?" I nervously asked. Suddenly, the dark figure came into focus, revealing an old man. He took something from his pocket before handing it to me. I couldn't believe my eyes. It was Big Ed's red handkerchief. "How did you—" I began stuttering. "What is it you desire?" asked the old man. Suddenly, a strange feeling swept over me. A feeling of intense euphoria crept up from my toes, flooding my brain. I wished every man who sleeps with my wife would get sick and die a slow, painful death. The words seemed to come out of my mouth as if someone else was saying. Suddenly, everything began to spin, and before I knew it, I was back in my truck. I reluctantly drove into work after spending a night in a dingy motel. All I wanted to do was punch Big Ed in his fat face, but with my marriage on the rocks, I knew I couldn't afford it. When I arrived, I was surprised to see Mason Bradley wasn't at his station. I didn't give it much thought until I saw Big Ed coming from the bathroom, looking like death warmed up. "Hey Ed, you don't look so good." Ed stood there looking pale as a ghost, trying to keep the contents of his stomach from ejecting from his mouth. "I think it was something I ate," he explained as I took a step back from him. "Has this anything to do with Bradley being out?" I asked. "Yeah, he was too sick to make it in today. Must be a bug doing the rounds." Over the next few days, I watched Big Ed get weaker until there was no sign of him. I had gotten word that Mason Bradley had died, and from what I was told, Big Ed wasn't far behind. Since Big Ed wasn't in, we knocked off early. As I drove home, I stopped at the local gas station to pick up some beers. Phil, the owner, was at the counter looking like he was about to pass out. "You alright, Phil? You're looking a bit pale there, buddy." Phil covered his mouth, trying his best not to puke all over the counter. "I'm after picking up this bug that's going around." It couldn't be, I thought to myself as I suddenly remembered the strange encounter I had the other night, the one I was sure was just a strange dream. "You look after yourself, Phil, and get yourself to a doctor. Will you give my love to that beautiful wife of yours, and tell her I'll drop over her magazines once I feel better," said Phil before dashing for the bathroom. As I drove into my driveway, I noticed Mrs. Stevens standing outside her house looking distraught. "What's wrong, Anne?" I asked. "It's Mike. They took him to the hospital." "Who took him?" Mr. Stevens was too distraught to get her words out. "Men in hazmat suits." I felt the familiar feeling of despair rise from the pit of my stomach. "Who else got sick?" "Bob, Tony from across the road, the guy who delivers the milk. They're dropping like flies." Days went by, and news of men getting sick and dying all over town continued to trickle in. Suddenly, I was hit with the realization that the man I met a few weeks ago wasn't a figment of my imagination. I wrestled with the guilt of everyone dying and the heartbreak of my wife's infidelity. I didn't want people dying, and if this was my fault, I needed to fix it. I got in my truck and began driving the same road as before. I was overwhelmed with the thoughts of people dying and the guilt and grief it brought with it. As I drove, I suddenly spotted the old man sitting by the roadside. I slammed on the brakes and jumped from my truck. I ran to the old man before dropping to my knees. "Please, I beg you, whatever you have done, you need to take it back." The old man gave me a confused look. "But it was what you desired. Why would you want to take it back?" I was upset, but I didn't want people to die. "Please, it's not what I desire," I cried. The old man put his hand on my shoulder. "What is it you truly desire?" "All I want is my wife to love me and only me," I begged. Suddenly, I was overcome with that same feeling of euphoria. My world began to spin before I was suddenly back in my truck and the old man was nowhere to be seen. As I walked in my front door, Susan was standing there waiting for me. She had a look on her face I'd never seen before. She ran and threw her arms around me before kissing me passionately. "I love you so much, Jack. Can you please forgive me?" "Of course I forgive you. I always do." My wife's face lit up, and for the first time, I could feel a genuine sense of love from her, a feeling I always desired. "From now on, you're the only man I want and need," she said as she led me upstairs to the bedroom. That night, we made passionate love as if we were the only two people that existed in the world. After we finished, we spent the rest of the night cuddling and planning for a better future together. The following morning, I woke with a splitting headache. As the days followed, I was stuck to the toilet, puking my guts up. As I got weaker, the terrifying realization of the first wish hit me like a ton of bricks. I write this as I'm in the final throes of death as a warning to others. Be careful what you wish for. I've worked prison security my entire life. A few months ago, I got a promotion, great pay, full accommodations, and one simple assignment: monitor the facility's camera system. No questions asked. I was told the prison and its inhabitants were classified, even to me. The pay was too good, the on-site housing was free, and I had a family to support, so I didn't ask. Now alarms are blaring all around me, and I don't know what I just saw, but I can't keep it classified. I have reviewed the footage for the 5th time, my hands trembling as I paused it on the prison's head of of security, Harris, and his panicked face. The alarms and flashing red lights of the control room filled the screen, disorienting even as a mere observer. Ah, crap, Harris's voice cracked through the audio feed. The camera zoomed in slightly on the screen he was staring at. The prison cell layout, a grid of green icons, had one glaring anomaly. A single cell on floor 4 in the far corner flashed an angry red. Unauthorized release blinked relentlessly in tandem with the deafening alarms. He grabbed the desk phone next to him with a speed that spoke to both his training and his fear. All units to containment floor now. His voice boomed over the speakers. We have a breach. Repeat, we have a breach in cell 4 corner. Code black. Code black. The words reverberated in my mind, the first in the facility's history. Harris didn't have time to dwell on the weight of it, and neither did I. I fast-forwarded the footage, watching guards scramble into action, weapons drawn, their postures rigid with tension. The control room camera shook slightly as Harris grabbed his rifle, slammed in a fresh magazine, and chambered a round. He was preparing to join them when gunfire erupted through the audio feed. I rewound and replayed that moment, trying to pinpoint the exact second the chaos began. The reinforced glass gave me a clear view of the containment wing as muzzle flashes illuminated the hallway below. I could see the flash of gunfire, but not the target. As fast as it began, it was over. Harris's movements faltered. His battle-hardened composure cracked as a low, guttural noise filtered through the intercom, something between a growl and a laugh. I shivered even behind my screen. Harris stepped out of the control room, entering the pitch-black hallway. The rotating red lights painted his shadow in a macabre dance across the walls. Guards rushed past him, forming a defensive line, their voices barely audible over the alarms. "With you, sir. What are your orders?" one shouted. I watched Harris take a breath, his hand tightening on his rifle. "Safety's off. Shoot to kill." His voice carried a forced confidence, but the trembling of his fingers told a different story. They moved forward deeper into the containment wing. I switched to another camera angle, tracking their progress. The cells lining the walls seemed to come alive with the sounds of screaming, laughing, and pounding as the other prisoners reacted to whatever had been unleashed. They rounded the corner and my breath hitched. The camera captured the massive steel-reinforced door to cell 4 corner, now twisted and dangling from a single hinge. A jagged gash split its surface, revealing the core beneath. One of the guards whispered, "What in the world could do that?" I'd asked myself the same question. Harris stepped forward, slipping on something. The camera zoomed in on the dark puddle beneath his boots. He crouched, touched it, then brought his fingers to his nose. Even without being there, I could almost smell the metallic tang of blood as Harris recoiled. He activated his flashlight, aiming it into the cell. The beam revealed carnage that made me pause the video, bile rising in my throat. Blood coated the walls, limbs and chunks of flesh strewn across the floor. The stench of iron seemed to seep through the screen. One of the guards let out a dry heave, but it was Harris's reaction that haunted me the most. He gagged, visibly shaken, his usual stoic demeanor cracking at the scene around him. The footage jumped as he spun, rifle aimed at a hand taking a weak grip on his ankle. One of his men lay on the floor, torso intact but legs gone, intestines strung along the floor behind him. The man's voice crackled through the audio. "Behind you." Harris turned, the other guards following his lead. The camera angle shifted to capture what they saw. My blood ran cold. A child, or something resembling one. It clung to the wall like an arachnid, limbs contorted, black eyes hollow and lifeless. Its mouth twisted into a grin that stretched impossibly wide, revealing rows of needle-like teeth. I froze the frame, staring at the monstrous visage. It didn't move until Harris did, his voice a choked whisper. "What in the fu—" The creature screeched, the sound shrill and inhuman before lunging. The room erupted into chaos. The guards opened fire, their muzzle flashes briefly illuminating the scene. Screams filled the audio feed, cutting off one by one until only static and the distant wail of alarms remained. The camera feed from the hallway flickered. When it stabilized, the scene was eerily quiet. Blood dripped from the walls and pooled on the floor. Then came the sound, a slow, deliberate scrape, thud, scrape, thud. The creature emerged, dragging Harris's lifeless body behind it. His blood painted a crimson trail on the cold steel floor like a signature written of gore. It approached the far wall where a sealed door stood. I rewound and played that segment repeatedly, unable to look away as the creature raised Harris by his matted hair. His head lolled and a weak cough escaped his lips, blood splattering the wall. He was still alive. The door scanner activated with a mechanical ping, a red laser trying to scan his face. Harris's final cry sent shivers down my spine. "No," he said as he tried to keep his eyes sealed tightly. Jagged fingers slithered along his forehead and curled under his eyelids, prying them open, forcing the scanner to accept his retina. Blood and tears flowed down his face as he screamed. The door unlocked with a hiss of decompressed air, large locks unlatching with a clang. The creature discarded Harris with a sickening thud, his head colliding with the wall. I had to stop the footage as his skull gave way, blood and brain spraying the lens, but I forced myself to finish it. The last moments showed the creature crawling through the now open door, slick with gore, leaving behind a facility drowning in silence and death, its demented form slowly morphing into that of an innocent child. I sat back, the weight of what I'd seen pressing down on me. My hands hovered over the keyboard, unsure of what to type or who to send this to. There were no protocols for this, no contingency plans for whatever it was. All I could think was, it's free. It looks like a child. It is out there amongst all of us. This is my only warning to you all. I will get thrown in prison for posting this, but it doesn't matter. I'll be safer in there than free with that thing out there. God save us all. I don't know if I should be posting this, but screw it. It's been over 20 years, and no one ever believed me anyway. Maybe someone out there can explain what I saw that night. Back in 2003, I worked security at a government-funded research site. Not gonna say where, but let's just say it was out in the middle of nowhere, far enough that if something went wrong, no one would hear the screams. The facility was a fortress, barbed wire, keycard access everywhere, armed patrols at night. Most of the time it was boring. Scientists came in, scientists left, and we were just there to make sure nobody messed with their work. But there was one project that always gave me the creeps. They called it Project Chimera. Even the other guards didn't know much about it, just that it involved biological stuff and that the scientists working on it never looked well rested. It was a quiet night shift. I was doing my usual rounds, walking the perimeter of the high security labs. Then my radio crackled. Containment breach in Lab 3, non-human interference. I remember thinking, what the hell does that mean? It wasn't unauthorized personnel, it wasn't security risk, it was non-human. I ran toward Lab 3, and when I got there, I saw two scientists standing outside looking absolutely terrified. Through the glass observation window I saw it, a deer. A stupid deer was standing inside the secure laboratory, right in the middle of all their high-tech equipment, its hooves tapping against the floor. It looked wrong. Not sick, not injured, just wrong. Its movements were jerky, its breathing was too slow. Its eyes were milky white, and I swear to God, for a second, I thought it was looking directly at me. One of the scientists, Dr. Nakamura, I think, was practically hyperventilating. She kept muttering something like, "It's interacting with the Matrix. This wasn't supposed to happen." Then the lights flickered, and everything went to hell. There was this low humming noise, like a power station warming up, but deeper, more alive. The air felt thick, like walking through syrup. The deer just stood there, its body twitching slightly, and the machines around it started sparking. Then, for a split second, it wasn't a deer anymore. I don't know how to explain it. It was still there, but its shape was warping, like it was being pulled apart and put back together at the same time. I could see other things inside it, patterns, shapes that didn't belong in a living creature. The scientists were screaming at each other, trying to shut the system down. I grabbed my radio and yelled, "We have a serious problem in Lab 3. But the second I said that, the deer snapped its head toward me so fast I heard its neck crack. And then it was gone. No explosion, no dramatic escape, just gone, like someone had flicked a switch and erased it from reality. The humming stopped, the machines went dead, the air felt normal again. They shut down the lab immediately. The higher-ups came in the next morning, cleared everything out, and told us not to ask questions. I overheard one of the researchers whispering that they found something left behind where the deer had been standing. A residue, some kind of organic material that didn't match anything they had on record. But no one ever explained what happened to the deer. They told us it was a security failure, that the deer had somehow wandered in through a ventilation shaft, which was bullcrap because I had walked that perimeter for months and there was no way a full-grown deer made it past all that security. A few weeks later, Project Chimera was shut down completely. The lab was sealed off and the lead researchers were reassigned or just disappeared. I put in my resignation not long after, but sometimes I still dream about that night, about the way the air felt wrong, about the deer's eyes, milky white, staring straight through me, and the way for just a second I swear it knew what I was thinking. The teacher knew from the look on my face I had forgotten my homework again. "What's your excuse this time, Toby?" she asked. "I'm sorry, miss. I left it on the kitchen table. I'll have it tomorrow, I promise." She had heard it many times before. It was the same old song and dance, and no matter what I said, it didn't stop me from getting detention. When I got home, my mother was waiting for me. The school had already phoned her, and I knew by the look on her face I was in big trouble. This is the third time this month the school rang me. "I'm sorry, Mom. I did leave my homework at home. Miss Henchley's just out to get me. She sent me to my room after she told me I was grounded for the week. I hated being grounded because all I had was my sister Cindy to talk to. Mrs. Henchley gave me detention again. I hate her. I wish somebody would teach her a lesson," I explained to Cindy. Cindy looked at me with a big smile on her face. "I can ask my friend to help you. Millie is great and does everything I ask her to do." My sister was annoying, but I found it cute that she had an imaginary friend. Later, I was jolted from my sleep, and Cindy was sitting by the dressing table with her back turned to me. "Get back to bed, Cindy. It's late. If Mom finds you out of bed, I'll get in trouble." I hated sharing a room with my sister who slept on the top bunk. When my dad died, we had to move to a smaller house. My mom said it was temporary, but it's been 2 years now, and I am still stuck in a tiny room with her. When I woke the following morning, my sister was already downstairs. I walked over to the dresser and picked up a drawing my sister must have drawn. My sister's drawings were usually cute. She likes unicorns and fairies, but this one was disturbing. It depicted a woman lying on the floor next to a busted up car, and she had red stuff coming from her head. I arrived at school that day to find Miss Henchley wasn't behind her desk. Instead, we had a substitute teacher who told us she was filling in after Miss Henchley was involved in a terrible car accident. It was then I remembered the picture Cindy had drawn. It was just a coincidence, I was sure of it, but I couldn't help feeling guilty. Either way, I wished this on her. The only upside to Miss Henley's accident was not having to do detention and go home. On the way home, I bumped into Damian Morsley. He was on my case all year, and every time he saw me, he gave me a beating, and this time was no different. When I got home all bloody and bruised, I went straight to my room. I didn't want my mother to make a big deal about it. I didn't want to give Damian more reason to hate me. "What happened to you?" my sister asked as she stepped into the room. "Nothing happened to me," I said as I scolded my sister for asking too many questions. "Was it that mean kid Damian again?" she asked in a concerned tone. "Yes, but you can't say anything to Mom. She will go ballistic." My sister looked at me again with that mischievous smile. "Don't worry, Millie will fix him." The next morning, I woke to find another drawing left on the dresser. This picture was even more disturbing than the last. It showed a kid lying on the floor with what appeared to be a knife sticking from his stomach and a man standing over him. For the first time, I was hoping Damian was in class, but there was no sign of him. As the day went on, rumors started spreading that Damian's father was arrested for doing something terrible to him. On the way home, I decided to take a detour past his house. I was shocked to find his house surrounded by police tape and people in white suits in the garden. A kid on a bike was standing across from the house, and when I asked him what happened, he confirmed my biggest fear, that Damian was murdered by his father. It couldn't be. I refused to believe it, but it happening twice was too much of a coincidence. I ran home and called Cindy up to the bedroom. "Cindy, you need to stop this imaginary friend business. I don't know how you're doing it, but people are getting hurt," I shouted. I could see the tears well up in her eyes. "But Millie's real, she is not imaginary. You wait and see," she said as she broke down crying before running out of the room. That night, I fell asleep feeling guilty about shouting at my sister. I tossed and turned from a restless sleep before I was jolted awake. My sister was sitting at the dresser again, so I shouted at her to get back into bed, but she ignored me and kept on drawing. "Who are you talking to?" said a voice from above me. Startled, I turned to see my sister still in her bed, but when I turned back, the girl at the dressing table was gone. I walked over to the dresser only to find another drawing. I picked it up and a feeling of dread crept up my spine as I looked at the drawing. It was a picture of someone impaled on spikes with blood pouring from them at the bottom of a canyon. I feel the blood drain from my body. Tomorrow is our annual school trip to the Grand Canyon. He was only gone for 2 days, said he needed to clear his head, so he packed light and headed up into the Wintas with his usual gear. No big deal, he's done it before, but this time when he came back, something was off. It started with how he walked in. No announcement, no "I'm back." Just opened the door, set his pack down, and stood in the kitchen like he forgot what it was for. I was at the table, mid-bite. He looked at me and smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Good trip? I asked. He nodded, still smiling. That smile didn't drop once the whole night. Not when he told me about the mountain lion tracks near his campsite. Not when I noticed he was wearing my sweatshirt, the one he hates. Not even when I asked what trail he took and he said, North Ridge. There is no North Ridge, not here. That night I couldn't sleep. Something about how he moved felt wrong. Too smooth, too studied. At one point I got up to check the locks and caught a glimpse of him in the hallway mirror. He was just standing in the dark, staring at it. Not at his reflection, at the space beside it. The next morning I found a dead bird on the porch. Not torn apart, just laid out neatly like a gift. He said he didn't put it there. Then he asked if I remembered when our mom died. The thing is, she's still alive. I waited until he went out back. He said he wanted to feel the sun, but just stood in the middle of the yard, arms hanging loosely at his sides, face tilted upward like he was trying to remember what warmth felt like. That gave me maybe 10 minutes. I went straight for his pack. It looked normal at first. His knife, half-used water bladder, trail snacks he didn't touch. But when I unzipped the bottom pouch, I found something he would have never brought home. A lock of hair, tied with red thread, dry, brittle. Not his color, not mine. It looked old, like it had been buried in salt or ash. Underneath it was a scrap of parchment. Something drawn in charcoal, rough circles layered with jagged lines. Stick figures warped around a central shape. I didn't recognize the symbol, but the longer I stared, the more I felt like I should. When I turned it over, a single word was scrawled in the corner in tiny, frantic handwriting: return. I barely had time to zip the pack shut before I heard the back door open. He stepped inside, eyes still fixed on the ceiling like something might be living just above it. You been in my bag? He asked calmly. I lied, said number. He smiled, that smile. It stayed frozen while he poured himself a glass of water, gulped it down too fast, then poured another. His throat made no sound as he swallowed. Later that night, I woke up to him humming a song we used to sing when we were little. Only half the melody was wrong. Notes bent in places they shouldn't bend. The words didn't rhyme anymore. And when I peeked down the hallway, I saw him standing at my bedroom door, back turned and not moving, just listening. He didn't say anything when I asked what he was doing. He just walked away. In the morning, he was already at the kitchen table when I got up. No coffee, just sitting. He looked at me with that too wide smile and said, "Why'd you lie, little brother?" He asked why I lied. I didn't answer. I just stood there, heartbeat hammering behind my ribs, wondering how long he'd known, if he saw me touch the pack, if he'd ever really turned his back at all. He didn't press the question, just smiled and went back to staring at the table. Later he left again. No word, no jacket, just walked out into the tree line and vanished like he'd always belonged there. This time I didn't check the pack. I waited, and after midnight he came back. His hands were covered in dirt, shirt torn, no blood, just wrong, like it wasn't made for his body anymore, like his limbs had started to stretch beneath the seams. He didn't say anything, just walked past me and went straight to the basement. That's when I heard it, knocking, but not from the door, from inside the pack, slow, wet, rhythmic, like knuckles dragging against plastic. I opened it. The first thing I saw was the hair again, matted now, damp with something dark. Beneath it, something wrapped in a tattered gray cloth. I should have stopped there. I didn't. I reached in and pulled it free. It was a jar, sealed with wax and twine. Inside was a mouth, not a full face, just a mouth twisted in a silent scream, gums torn back, lips stitched closed with animal sinew, but it was breathing. The glass fogged up every few seconds. It was trying to speak. Then I realized something. It looked like mine. I dropped it. The jar didn't break. It just rolled to the edge of the floor and sat there, vibrating softly. Then from the basement his voice called up, except it wasn't really his, it was mine. Low, hollow, almost like he was trying it on for the first time. "Why'd you go through my things, little brother?" I didn't answer. I was too busy watching the jar. It was smiling now.
If you enjoyed these stories, please consider subscribing and liking this video. Let me know your thoughts of these stories in the comments below. I frequently talk to my viewers there. But anyways, I hope you were creeped out.
Just kidding. Stay safe.